So when I talk about doing something different, I just mentioned the words pattern breaking action. And this is this idea that typically when we get stuck in these recurring conflicts where it feels like no matter what we do, we can't seem to find our way out or we can't seem to resolve it, the best thing we can do is to do something different. But probably what got us stuck is the result of a complex set of factors. And so it's probably not just one action that's going to help free us from conflict. It's going to be a series of actions over time.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the KTS Success Factor podcast for women, where we talk about challenges senior female leaders face in being happy and successful at work. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah E. Brown. My guest today is Jennifer Goldman-Wetzler. She is a leading expert on conflict and the founder and CEO of Alignment Strategies Group. She's also the author of a new book, Optimal Outcomes: Free Yourself from Conflict at Work, at Home, and in Life, which was selected as a Financial Times Book of the Month. For 2 decades, she has advised senior leaders at both global corporations and in the public sector in a wide range of industries, as well as at large nonprofit and governmental institutions. As a keynote speaker, Jennifer inspires audiences of all kinds, spanning Google and TEDx, to Harvard and Columbia University, where for the past decade, she has served as adjunct professor in the Department of Organization and Leadership and taught a very popular course on conflict freedom. She also coaches global business and government leaders in the executive education program at Columbia Business School. Earlier in her career, she was director of negotiation programs at Mediation Works Incorporated and a facilitator at the Program on Negotiation at Harvard Law School. In addition to Jennifer's new book, Optimal Outcomes, she has also written the book, Emotions in Long-Term Conflict. Her work has been featured in the Financial Times, Forbes Inc., MarketWatch, Success Magazine, The Washington Times, The New York Post, Chief Learning Officer Magazine, Fast Company, Fortune, and many others. And she currently writes the Achieving Conflict Freedom column in Psychology Today. She's a former counterterrorism research fellow with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and received her BA from Tufts University. She holds a PhD in social organizational psychology from Columbia University. Welcome, Jen. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
As you know, we're speaking primarily to senior female executives. And as you think about serving that audience in your past, what do you see as the biggest challenge you are helping female leaders face in business today? And what might be the symptoms of that challenge?
Well, the biggest challenge that I help female leaders in business today deal with is how to free themselves from conflict, particularly difficult, challenging conflict, the kind of conflict that doesn't go away no matter how many times you or other people have tried to resolve it. So the symptoms should feel very real to most people listening, right? These are symptoms like frustration,
tension.
Right, you name it, any kind of
Shall I tell you about mine?
Negative,
yes,
negative experience that people have in organizations often comes back to conflict that they're having with other people. It's just extremely, extremely common.
And what do you see are the biggest mistakes your clients make before working with you?
The biggest mistakes that people make are trying to resolve conflict rather than freeing themselves from it and trying to resolve it even when they've tried and they've tried and they've tried and other people have tried and tried and tried and nothing they do seems to be making a difference. So we've spent the last 40 plus years learning as a global society, and particularly in America and in the West, about collaborative, win-win, principled negotiation. And this has been a very, very successful way of resolving conflict that we didn't use in the past. We tended to approach conflict as this win-lose situation. And so win-win is a very helpful methodology. The problem is that when we use it, and it's the only way that we know to try to deal with conflict in our lives, and if it's not working, then we're stuck. What do we do? So really, somewhat counterintuitively, one of the biggest mistakes that I see people today in business make is relentlessly seeking to collaborate, even when other people have been clearly unwilling to cooperate with them.
And what is the number one free and actionable tip you can give them to address this challenge now?
It's very simple. It's not always easy, but it is simple. And that is when you notice that you're in a situation that where it feels like no matter what you do, you're not making any headway, you just keep getting stuck and stuck and stuck. I ask you to, first of all, take a step back and observe the situation and notice that you are stuck. That's the first step. And the second one is to ask yourself, what is one simple action that I could take that would be different from what I have done before in this situation? So, for example, if I've been relentlessly seeking to collaborate with other people, I've been offering them option after option, I've been calling them up and asking them what they need, I've been letting them know my needs, I've been trying to find ways to work this out. And if that hasn't been working, my advice is to ask yourself, what would be different, still constructive, but what would be different than that? And so it could be any number of things that would be different. You could pause and take a break and see if they might have something to say to you. Or you could be more direct and just let them know what you need and stop worrying so much about what they need and see if that makes a difference. So there's all different kinds of opportunities that could arise once you stop, pause, notice how you're stuck, and then challenge yourself to simply do something different, surprisingly different than you've done before.
Stop and do something different. That's a great piece of advice. And what would be a valuable free resource you can share with the women who are listening today to help them understand this challenge better?
There are actually 10 free PDF resources that are on my website that each correspond to a different chapter in the book that help walk you through exactly how to do, for example, what I was just talking about a moment ago. How do you pause and notice how you've gotten stuck? Well, there's a quiz online that you can take that will diagnose your conflict habit. What's your primary conflict habit, for example? And then there are PDFs that walk you through how to create a pattern-breaking path, how to actually do something simple and different over time, et cetera, for each one of the 8 different practices that are in the book.
And to be clear, the website that you're referring to is alignmentstrategiesgroup.com.
I'm glad that you clarified that. The website is optimaloutcomesbook.com/resources.
Great. Okay, I'm glad I clarified that. And we will have that in the show notes as well. So, Jen, what is one question that I should have asked you that will help our audience take action to address this challenge? And then would you please answer the question?
Yes. So when I talk about doing something different, I just mentioned the words pattern breaking action. And this is this idea that typically when we get stuck in these recurring conflicts where it feels like no matter what we do, we can't seem to find our way out or we can't seem to resolve it, the best thing we can do is to do something different. But probably what got us stuck is the result of a complex set of factors. And so it's probably not just one action that's going to help free us from conflict. It's going to be a series of actions over time. So one way to think about, well, why do I call it a pattern breaking path? That's because it's made up of 3 things, this pattern breaking path. Number 1, it's action that is simple. Because when you're involved in a situation that has been multiply determined by complex factors, you want to start simple. You don't want to add more complexity on top of it and make it even more complex. You want to do something simple so that you can track your impact over time. It makes it much easier to do that. So keep your actions simple. Number 2, keep your actions surprisingly different from what you've done in the past. Sometimes when you're going around and around on what I call this conflict loop, when you surprise someone by doing something surprisingly different than you've done before, it can jolt them out of the conflict loop too in a good way. And that's one way that you free yourself from this conflict loop, and you by just naturally free other people as well. So do something surprisingly different than you've done before. So back to the example we gave before, if you've been seeking to relentlessly collaborate with other people and that doesn't seem to be working, being direct and telling someone what you need might shock them a little bit in a good way. It could kind of help free you both from that conflict loop. And third, each action on that pattern breaking path leads to the one that comes after it. So each action builds on the one that comes before it, so that there's a series of surprisingly different, simple actions over time that leads you out of this conflict loop to freedom, to this optimal outcome that you imagine for yourself, which is another one of the practices in the book.
What a great summary. Simple action, surprisingly different, and each action builds on the one before it. What a great thing to keep in mind. Jen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the KTS Success Factor podcast for women. If you like what you are hearing, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate us, and leave a review. And if you would like more information on how we can help women in your organization to thrive, then go to www.sarahebrown.com. You can sign up for our newsletter, read show notes, and learn more about our podcast guests, read my blog, browse through the books, or contact us for a chat. Goodbye for now.